Marx had one thing, he said it was the abolition of private property. In other words, we could own nothing. And as a capitalist, that kind of upsets me a bit, you know. So they wanted to take all of our private property away, and it would then go to the state. And that's why when you study communism and Marxism, it's a centralized economy. In military terms, it's called command and control. I went to military school. So it's a command and control economy where the government tells you everything. So that's why the Federal Reserve Bank is part of a communist thing. It's a central bank. And the central bank is not American, it's not a bank, and there's no reserves in it. And it's the Fed today is the third central bank. And for history, since Jefferson and those guys, they kept saying we cannot have central banks. But because our academic system is basically Marxist, you know, most school teachers are Marxists, they just don't know it because they didn't study Marx like I did. I'm a capitalist. I don't have a job. I don't have a paycheck. It's so opposite because that was my rich dad teaching me, and my poor dad said, get a safe, secure job. So the mindsets are completely opposite. You bought the currency. So in 1971, just before I went to Vietnam, Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard. But they don't teach you that. You see, our system is communist. And I hate to say that because I'm a Marine. I went to Vietnam twice. I fought for this country, went to military school. Like I said, my family were locked in internment camps. All you communists out there, check this stuff out. I am a billionaire in debt. You know why? Because I get tax breaks for borrowing money. And the reason I am so rich is because I'm in debt. And my friend Dave Ramsey says, live debt free. I'm going, well, you're an idiot. I mean, he's my friend, but I say, Dave, I like debt. He says, I know, but most people can't handle debt. I said, I agree. But that's why there's no financial education in schools, because if you knew how to handle debt, you wouldn't save that crappy dollar you have in your hand. I'd rather borrow the money tax-free. I have to invest it to make more money. Everybody thinks it's real estate, stocks. You know, when I talk to most idiots out there, they go, oh, I have a 401k. I go, well, you've been sold a bill of goods, sweetheart. The government sponsors this 401k. I said, no, the Federal Reserve and Wall Street sponsors it. If you study history, in 1974, there was an act called the ERISA Act, Employee Retirement Income Security Act. That led to a thing called the 401k. And that was in 1974, just after Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard, and then the economy could boom through the stock market. So do I own any stocks? No, because I'm not a communist. I am a capitalist. I don't have to buy stocks. I invent my own. That's what capitalists do. The more money I borrow, the less tax I pay. So what happens? So let's say I own a commercial building. I buy it for $1 million. It goes up to $10 million. Most guys would sell it. The moment you sell, let's say, a basis of 1 million to a basis of 10, I have a $9 million capital gains. So instead of selling it and flipping it like those flippers do, I don't flip, I don't sell. See, the moment you sell, as you know as an attorney, you've now executed a capital event, a taxable event. So what I do, let's say I buy a property for $1 million, it goes to $10 million. I'll borrow out 5 tax-free. It's not a crash. We're on a depression right now. A recession is 2 quarters of declining growth, but a depression is suboptimal growth. So you could have, let's say your GDP should be 4%, but you're operating at 2%. That's a depression. People don't know history. Is that what happened on September 17, 2019? There was a crash in the repo market. The average person has no idea what the repo market was. Then what happened in 2021, so they pumped up. So the last time there was a crash in the repo market was 2008. So I'm sitting here in 2019, September 17th. I said, my God, the repo market crashed. And then a few months later, COVID appears. I went, oh my God, here it is. Repo market is, I call it the pawn shop. It's where people go in there and what happened at the repo market is the Fed starts pumping money into the commercial banks like Bank of America and those guys, Wells Fargo. So they started pumping money into the banks because the banks were empty. That's what happened when Lehman Brothers went down. They didn't have enough cash in them. But it's not even goes into the economy. It stays within the banking system. So what happens in a reverse repo, so 2008 was a repo, 2019 was a repo, and what happened in 2021 was a reverse repo. The money started coming out of banks and going back to the Fed. Now the average guy, what does that mean? It means that the commercial banks don't trust their assets. Their assets are questionable. There's a valuation. Valuation is an opinion. This house is worth $10 million. Well, that's an opinion. So they started wondering what was the true valuation of their so-called assets. So the money started coming out of commercial banks like Bank of America and Wells Fargo, flowed back into the Fed because they'd rather have it at the Fed than in the marketplace. My friends are billionaires. That's what we talk about. The average person has no idea what we're talking about. We have to watch the flows of cash. I'll bet you $1 million. You ask 100 people what the repo market is, you'd be lucky if 50 know what it means. That's not a mistake. It's not an indictment against them. It's an indictment against the school system. It's criminal. I mean, the only reason they gave the CEOs all that money is so they could repurchase their stock. So let's say I'm IBM or Ford. You give me $1 million, okay? So I borrow $5 million from the Ford's treasury. I buy $6 million of my stock. It jacks the stock price up. So mommy and daddy with their 401k, the Ford Motor Company went up in price. It's all floating on debt. Let me just say this much. Markets go up and markets come down. It's coming down. And then we're going into depression, and then we go into revolution. Depression is when more jobs are lost and they're going to have to print more money. And just as they did to prevent when Fauci, fascist Fauci shut down the U.S. economy, the whole world economy is shut down. How can they pay people not to work? America is now the largest debtor nation in history. Student loan debt is out of sight. Consumer loan debt is out of sight. Stock market is all based upon debt. The debt to GDP ratio, it was really simple. When debt to GDP hits 90%, so we have 90% debt to GDP. That's pretty optimal. That means every dollar you borrow, when it's 90%, the economy grows by 10%. So it's a 10 to 1, a 10% ratio. Today, the debt to GDP ratio is 140%. They cannot add any more money to it. It's not going to grow. That's what it means. So it's like a guy who has a house that's he kept refinancing his house and he loses his job. He can't borrow anymore. So that's what happens when the debt to GDP went past 90 to 1, 90% debt to GDP. And there's 140%. We're bankrupt. Well, the average guy has no clue what I just said to you. We're already finished. Gold, silver, Bitcoin, bullets. Only reason I buy Bitcoin is I don't trust my government. I don't trust the Federal Reserve Bank. I don't trust the Treasury. I don't trust basement Biden, and I don't trust the stock market. Now, if you trust all four of them, have a good life. I have gold, silver, Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is a bet against the government. I'll say this one more time. If you study Marx, a central bank is essential to communism. That's the Fed. It's the third central bank we've had. It came into existence in 1913. In 1913, the Fed was created, so was the tax department in 1913. Oh, coincidence. The average guy has no idea that happened. One more quick story, really quickly. I hang out with a friend. He's a billionaire. I mean, most of my friends are billionaires, close friends, No, but we're billionaires because of debt. We didn't sit there and save our pennies. So anyway, we said, well, is there a crash coming? So I don't know. We're looking for a sign from God. So right after they kind of lifted all the things on COVID, we walked into this restaurant right down the street here in Scottsdale, and everybody was dressed in evening gowns, And he looked at me and I looked at him and said, the crash is coming. I said, when you have all these old guys like me and their wives dressed in evening gowns, the end is near. We call it the evening gown theory of economics. Everybody, no, just before every crash, people are the happiest. And then they get really depressed, and that's when the capitalists get rich, because everything goes on sale. And so everything's opposite. There's always the three sides to every coin: heads, tails, and the edge of the coin. And I stand on the edge. I say, well, it's boom and bust and all this. But anyway, everything is opposite. There's always three sides to a coin: heads, tails, and the edge. And intelligence is found in the edge. And a trouble with opinion is you have to take a side.